The massive crystal dome stretched across the sky like a frozen ocean. Inside the Galactic Tribunal's main chamber, 5 alien species sat on thrones that floated high above the floor. Each throne was different, built for creatures that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. The Zephyrians looked like living lightning. Their bodies were made of pure energy that sparked and danced in the air. They spoke without mouths, their words appearing directly in other minds. The Karathi were mountains of black stone with glowing cracks that served as eyes. They had been alive since before most stars were born. The Nexari moved as one mind in thousands of bodies, each bug-like creature no bigger than a human hand, but together forming something vast and terrible. In the water-filled section of the chamber, the thalassans floated like giant jellyfish with tentacles that could slice through metal. Their dome bubbled and hissed as they communicated through color changes across their transparent skin. High above them all, the Voidborn drifted like shadows made solid, beings from the space between stars who fed on the light of dying suns. These 5 species controlled everything. Every trade route, every planet, every species that wanted to leave their home world had to ask permission from the tribunal. For 10,000 years it had been this way. They decided who could build ships, who could explore, who could even talk to other species. The galaxy was theirs and everyone else just lived in it. Today felt like any other day. The tribunal was hearing cases about minor violations and trade disputes. A species called the Brelics wanted permission to mine asteroids in their own star system. Denied. The aquatic Fintari requested access to a water world 3 systems away. Under review for the next century. A primitive species called the humans wanted to meet with the tribunal about their recent expansion. The word expansion made the energy beings laugh, if their crackling sounds could be called laughter. The Karathi rumbled with amusement, shaking dust from their stone bodies. The Nexari buzzed in harmony, creating a sound like 1,000 angry insects. Even the normally silent Voidborn seemed to ripple with something like mirth. Humans. The name had appeared in reports recently, but barely rated attention. They came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system. Carbon-based life forms with short lifespans of barely 100 years. They had no telepathic abilities, no energy manipulation powers, no collective consciousness, no ability to phase through matter. They could not even survive in space without crude mechanical suits. The reports were amusing to read. Humans had somehow built basic faster-than-light ships using primitive fusion drives and electromagnetic fields. They had established colonies on 17 worlds without asking anyone for permission. They had even made contact with other species and started trading with them. All of this in less than 50 years since they discovered space travel. It was like watching children play with dangerous toys. The tribunal had seen it all before. Young species would get excited about space travel, expand too quickly, make contact with others, then collapse from their own chaos. Usually it took a few centuries. Sometimes the tribunal would intervene if the species showed promise, placing them under proper guidance and control. Most of the time they just let nature take its course. The chamber's main display activated, showing a small ship approaching the station. It was laughably tiny compared to the massive alien vessels that normally visited the tribunal. The human ship looked like it was built from spare parts and hope. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals. Its engines burned with the orange glow of simple chemical reactions instead of the elegant blue of antimatter, or the pure white of 0 point energy. More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Zephyrians sparked brighter. The Karathi made grinding sounds that passed for chuckling. The Nexari's buzzing became almost musical with their amusement. The thalassans shifted through rapid color changes that meant hilarity in their language. Even the Voidborn seemed to grow slightly more solid with what might have been entertainment. A single figure stepped out of the ship when it docked. The viewing screen zoomed in to show a small bipedal creature walking across the docking bay. She was even smaller than the reports suggested, barely reaching the chest height of most other species. Her skin was a pale pink-brown color, and she had long dark hair tied back in a simple style. She wore a plain blue uniform with small, metal decorations that probably meant something to her people. She carried a simple bag and what looked like a primitive datapad made from actual paper bound in leather, paper made from dead plant matter. The Nexari found this particularly funny since they had been using quantum storage crystals for their hive memory since before humans had discovered fire. The woman walked through the station's corridors without seeming impressed by anything she saw. The floating gardens of the Zephyrians, the crystal formations of the Korathi, the flowing water sculptures of the Thalassans, the shadow art of the Voidborn. She looked at everything with the same calm expression, occasionally making notes on her paper pad with what appeared to be a simple ink writing tool. Other species in the corridors stopped to stare at her. Most had never seen a human before. She was so ordinary, so unremarkable. No natural weapons, no obvious signs of intelligence. Beyond basic tool use, no impressive physical capabilities. She looked exactly like what she was, a primitive creature from a young species that had barely learned to leave their home planet. The woman reached the main chamber doors, which were 5 times her height and made from crystallized starlight. They opened automatically and she walked inside without hesitation. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space as she crossed the floor toward the center of the chamber. She stopped at the speaking circle, a raised platform where those who addressed the tribunal were expected to stand. She looked up at the 5 thrones floating far above her. Her neck had to crane back to see them all. For a moment, she just stood there, taking in the sight of the beings who controlled the galaxy. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that projected her voice clearly through the chamber. "Honored members of the Galactic Tribunal," she said in heavily accented Galactic Standard, the common language used for official business. Her pronunciation was clumsy, like someone who had learned the language from books instead of proper neural downloads. "My name is Sarah Chun. I represent the United Earth Government and the Human Colonial Alliance. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." More laughter rippled through the chamber. The idea that this tiny creature thought she was important enough to warrant their attention was delightfully amusing. The Korathi judge, a being older than human civilization, shifted on his throne. Rocks fell from his massive form as he leaned forward to get a better look at the little mammal standing far below. "Human," his voice boomed like an avalanche, "you stand accused of violations of galactic law, unauthorized expansion, unsanctioned contact with regulated species, unlicensed faster-than-light travel, illegal establishment of colonies in restricted space. How do you answer these charges?" Sarah Chun looked down at her paper notes, flipped through a few pages, then looked back up at the towering aliens above her. She seemed completely unimpressed by their size, their power, or their obvious contempt for her species. "Before I answer," she said calmly, "may I ask a few questions of my own?" The laughter grew louder. The audacity of this primitive creature was beyond amusing. It was almost refreshing to see such ignorance of proper protocol. Usually, species that came before the tribunal were appropriately terrified. This human seemed to think she was at some sort of business meeting instead of facing judgment from the rulers of the galaxy. "You may speak," the Korathi judge said, with the tone one might use when humoring a small child. Sarah Chun smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The Korathi judge's voice filled the chamber like thunder rolling through mountains. Each word made the crystal walls vibrate and sent small pieces of debris falling from the ceiling. Other alien species in the viewing gallery stopped their conversations to listen. It was always entertaining when the tribunal dealt with primitive species who did not understand their place in the galaxy. "Human Sarah Chun," the massive stone being rumbled, "you will now hear the specific charges against your species. You will listen without interruption. You will answer when asked. You will accept the judgment of this tribunal." Sarah Chun nodded politely and pulled out her paper notebook again. She clicked her primitive ink pen and prepared to write. The sight of her using such basic tools made several aliens in the galleries point and whisper. Some even took pictures. With their advanced recording devices to show friends later, the Zephyrian prosecutor floated forward. sparks of electricity dancing around its energy form. When it spoke, its voice crackled like lightning and appeared directly in everyone's mind rather than traveling through the air. The species known as humans stand accused of 17 separate violations of galactic law, the energy being announced. First violation, unauthorized expansion beyond your designated home system. Your species was granted ownership of the Sol system only. You have established permanent settlements on 17 worlds in 12 different star systems without requesting permission from this tribunal. Sarah Chun wrote something in her notebook. She looked completely focused on taking notes, like a student in a classroom rather than a criminal facing judgment. Second violation, the Zephyrian continued, its form growing brighter with apparent pleasure. Unsanctioned contact with regulated species. You have made diplomatic and trade agreements with the Altarians, the Centauri Collective, and the Vegan Mining Guild. These species are under tribunal protection and guidance. Contact with them requires prior approval. More scribbling in the notebook. Sarah Chun turned a page and kept writing. Third violation, unlicensed development and distribution of faster-than-light technology. Your crude jump drives were developed without tribunal oversight. You have shared this technology with unauthorized species, creating an unregulated transportation network. The Nexari swarm took over. Thousands of small insect-like creatures speaking in unison to create a single voice that buzzed through the chamber. Fourth violation, illegal terraforming activities. You have modified the atmospheres of 6 worlds without environmental impact studies. You have introduced Earth-based life forms to alien ecosystems without permission. You have built cities and industrial facilities without regard for proper galactic zoning laws. Sarah Chun looked up briefly from her writing. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Could you repeat that last part about zoning laws? I want to make sure I get the details right." The Nexari paused, confused by the interruption. No one had ever asked them to repeat charges before. Usually species were too terrified to speak at all during the formal reading. Zoning laws, they buzzed again, slower this time. All industrial development in the galaxy must follow tribunal guidelines for location, size, and environmental impact. Your species has ignored these completely. "Thank you," Sarah Chun said, making another note. "Please continue." The Thalassan representative flowed forward in its water-filled section of the chamber. Its tentacles moved in complex patterns while colors shifted across its transparent body. A translation device converted its chromatic language into words. Fifth violation, unauthorized military expansion. Your species has constructed armed vessels without declaring them to the tribunal. You have established what appear to be military bases on 7 worlds. You have developed weapon systems that have not been submitted for safety review. Sixth violation, cultural contamination. You have shared human art, music, literature, and scientific concepts with other species without cultural protection protocols. You have allowed unrestricted information exchange that could destabilize traditional alien societies. Seventh violation, economic disruption. Your free trade agreements with multiple species have created new economic patterns outside tribunal control. You have established currency exchanges and resource-sharing networks without proper oversight. The Voidborn spoke last, its shadow form rippling as words seemed to emerge from the darkness itself. 8th through 17th violations, interference with tribunal authority. You have encouraged other species to question established laws. You have provided technical assistance to species designated as pre-spaceflight. You have refused to acknowledge tribunal jurisdiction over human activities. You have established independent communication networks. You have created mutual defense agreements. You have shared historical information that contradicts official tribunal records. You have promoted concepts of individual species sovereignty. You have supported resistance movements among controlled populations. You have openly defied orders to cease expansion. You have requested this meeting rather than submitting to tribunal authority. Sarah Chun finished writing and looked up at the floating thrones. She closed her notebook and put her pen away. Then she stood quietly, hands folded behind her back. Waiting, the Korathi judge leaned forward again, more rocks falling from his ancient stone body. These charges represent the most serious violations we have seen in over 1,000 years. Your species has shown complete disregard for the order and stability that has kept the galaxy peaceful for 10 millennia. Do you understand the severity of these accusations? The Zephyrian prosecutor crackled. Oh yes, Sarah Chun said calmly. I understand perfectly. Do you deny any of these charges? Rumbled the Korathi. Sarah Chun appeared to think about this. For a moment, no, I don't deny any of them. In fact, you missed a few things. Shocked silence filled the chamber. The aliens looked at each other in confusion. Species facing the tribunal usually either begged for mercy or tried to make excuses. They never admitted guilt and certainly never suggested that the charges were incomplete. You missed our exploration missions to 43 additional star systems? Sarah Chun continued matter-of-factly. You missed our cultural exchange programs with 8 more species. You missed our joint scientific research projects. You missed our shared defense training exercises. And you definitely missed our archaeological expeditions to sites throughout the galaxy. The buzzing of confused conversation filled the viewing galleries. Archaeological expeditions? What could a primitive species like humans possibly learn from studying ancient ruins? They barely had written language when most of these sites were already millions of years old. The Thalassian representative's colors shifted to deep purple, indicating extreme irritation. You admit to additional violations beyond those listed? I admit to additional activities, Sarah Chun corrected. Whether they're violations depends on who has the authority to make such laws. More shocked silence. The Nexari swarm buzzed angrily. No one questioned the tribunal's authority, ever. That was not how the galaxy worked. The authority, the Korathi judge said slowly, as if explaining something obvious to a child, belongs to the species that have maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years. The authority belongs to those with the power to enforce the law. The authority belongs to us. Sarah Chun nodded thoughtfully. That's an interesting perspective, but I have some questions about that. Questions? The Zephyrian's energy form flared brighter. You are facing judgment, not conducting an investigation. Oh, but I think the two things might be related, Sarah Chun said. She opened her notebook again and flipped to a different section. You see, my people are very curious. We like to understand things before we make important decisions. And we've been studying this galaxy for quite some time now. Studying? The Voidborn's shadow form seemed to grow larger. What could a primitive species possibly study that would be relevant to these proceedings? Sarah Chun smiled again. It was the same expression she had shown earlier, and somehow it seemed even less pleasant now. History, she said simply. We've been studying the history of this galaxy. The real history. Not the version you've been telling everyone. The laughter that had filled the chamber earlier was completely gone now. For the first time in thousands of years, the members of the Galactic Tribunal felt something they had forgotten existed. Uncertainty. The silence stretched through the massive chamber like a living thing. The alien spectators in the viewing galleries had stopped their conversations completely. Even the constant background hum of the station systems seemed quieter than before. All eyes, sensors, and consciousness fields focused on the small human standing in the center of the room. Sarah Chun opened her notebook to a page covered with neat handwriting and small drawings. She looked up at the 5 floating thrones above her and cleared her throat politely. Before I respond to your charges, she said in the same calm voice she had used throughout the proceedings, I'd like to establish some basic facts. How long has this tribunal existed in its current form? The Korathi judge shifted uncomfortably on his throne. Small avalanches of rock fell to the chamber floor below. The Galactic Tribunal has maintained peace and order for 10,000 years, he rumbled. This is well known. 10,000 years, Sarah Chun repeated, making a note. And how many spacefaring species existed in the galaxy when the tribunal was first established? The Zephyrian prosecutor's energy form flickered with irritation. This line of questioning is irrelevant to the charges against your species. I think it might be more relevant than you realize, Sarah Chun said pleasantly. But I'll take that as an admission that you don't know the answer. Of course we know, the Nexari swarm buzzed angrily. There were approximately 50,000 species with faster-than-light capability when the tribunal was formed. Sarah Chun nodded and wrote something down. 50,000. And how many spacefaring species exist today? Current galactic census. Records show 47,812 species with verified FTL capability. The Thalassian representative answered, its colors shifting to indicate mild confusion about the purpose of these questions. So, in 10,000 years of your leadership, the number of spacefaring species has actually decreased, Sarah Chun observed. That's interesting. Where did the other 2,000 species go? Natural evolution, the Voidborn Shadow responded immediately. Some species advance beyond the need for physical space travel. Others choose to focus on developing their home systems rather than expanding. Still, others merge with larger civilizations for mutual benefit. Ah, Sarah Chun said, flipping to another page in her notebook. Natural evolution? Let me ask about some specific cases then, she read from her notes. What happened to the builders? The chamber fell silent again. This time the silence had a different quality to it, heavier and more uncomfortable. Several of the alien spectators began whispering nervously among themselves. The builders, the Karathi judge said slowly. We are not familiar with any species by that designation. Sarah Chun looked up from her notebook with raised eyebrows. Really? The species that constructed the hyperlane network your ships use? For faster-than-light travel? The ones who built the massive ring stations that serve as your administrative centers? The civilization that created the quantum communication arrays that allow instant messaging across the galaxy? Those infrastructure elements are ancient, the Zephyrian crackled. Their origins are lost to history. Lost to history, Sarah Chun repeated. How convenient. She flipped another page. What about the Songweavers? The species that developed the universal translation protocols that allow all of us to communicate. Right now? Unknown? The Nexari buzzed, but their harmonious voice had lost some of its confidence. The Crystal Gardens? The ones who terraform the agricultural worlds that feed half the galaxy? These are myths and legends, the Thalassian said, but its color patterns showed uncertainty. The Lightbringers, the Deep Wanderers, the Star Shepherds? Sarah Chun continued reading names from her list. All myths and legends? All natural evolution and voluntary mergers? You are wasting the tribunal's time with fantasy stories, the Voidborn declared, but its shadow form was noticeably less solid than before. Sarah Chun closed her notebook and looked directly up at the 5 thrones. 3 years ago, human archaeological teams discovered intact ruins on Kepler 442b. The planet was supposed to be uninhabited, according to your records. But we found a complete city preserved in crystalline stasis. The inhabitants called themselves the Harmony Makers. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that projected a 3-dimensional hologram into the air above her head. The image showed towering spires of living crystal and beings that looked like walking musical instruments, their bodies designed to create and manipulate sound waves. They were beautiful, Sarah Chun continued. Their entire civilization was based on acoustic engineering. They could reshape matter using precisely tuned vibrations. They had achieved perfect harmony between technology and art, and according to their historical records, they were contacted by the Galactic Tribunal 9,734 years ago. The hologram changed to show official documents covered in alien script and the seal of the tribunal. The tribunal told them they were expanding too quickly, that their acoustic terraforming was disrupting established trade routes, that their technology was dangerous and needed to be regulated. The Harmony Makers agreed to tribunal oversight. They accepted limitations on their expansion. They submitted their research for approval. The projected documents showed agreement after agreement, each one placing new restrictions on the Harmony Makers' activities. Within 200 years, they were forbidden from leaving their home system. Within 500 years, they were prohibited from sharing their technology with other species. Within 800 years, they were classified as a protected species that needed tribunal guidance for their own safety. The hologram now showed the decline of the Crystal City, the beautiful spires growing dark and silent, the musical beings becoming fewer and fewer. The last entry in their records was made 1,200 years ago. It's a simple statement. We have forgotten how to sing. The tribunal says this is for the best. Tomorrow we enter the preservation chambers until someone remembers why music matters. Sarah, Chun turned off the hologram and put the device back in her bag. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station seemed to have stopped. We found similar ruins on 17 other worlds, she continued. Always the same pattern. Brilliant civilizations that submitted to tribunal authority. Gradual restrictions on their freedom and development. Slow decline into irrelevance. Final disappearance from all records. You are misinterpreting ancient data, the Karathi judge said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Am I? Sarah Chun pulled out another device, this one projecting a star map of the galaxy. Thousands of systems were marked in different colors. Our archaeological surveys have identified the former locations of 67 extinct civilizations. All of them showed the same pattern of decline after contact with the tribunal. The map zoomed in to show specific regions. The Builder remnants here. Songweaver ruins there. Crystal Garden terraforming scars throughout this sector. Evidence of advanced civilizations that just stopped existing. This is all speculation based on incomplete data. The Zephyrium protested, but its energy form was flickering erratically. Is it? Sarah Chun asked. She reached into her bag one more time and pulled out something that made every alien in the chamber freeze in shock. It was a small crystal tablet covered in flowing script. The writing seemed to shift and change as they watched, cycling through dozens of different alien languages before settling on Galactic Standard. This is a data core from a builder's archive, Sarah Chun said simply. It contains the complete historical records of the galaxy for the past 50,000 years, including detailed documentation of what really happened to the thousands of species that have vanished during the tribunal's reign. She looked up at the 5 thrones where the rulers of the galaxy sat in stunned silence. Would you like me to read some of the more interesting entries? For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Tribunal had nothing to say. Sarah Chun held the crystal tablet in her hands like it was the most ordinary thing in the universe. The ancient builder data core pulsed with soft blue light, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to write themselves as the aliens watched. The viewing galleries had fallen completely silent. Even the constant whispers and movements that normally filled the chamber during proceedings had stopped entirely. The Karathi judge was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely more than a grinding whisper. That artifact is impossible. The builders have been extinct for 30,000 years. Their technology cannot function anymore. Actually, Sarah Chun said, running her finger along the tablet's surface, they've been extinct for exactly 27,412 years. And their technology works perfectly well if you know how to activate it properly. She looked up at the floating thrones with a small smile, which we do. The Zephyrian prosecutor's energy form flickered wildly, sparks flying in all directions. Even if that device is genuine, any records it contains would be corrupted after so much time. Ancient data storage is notoriously unreliable. Builder technology doesn't work the same way as modern systems, Sarah Chun explained patiently. They didn't store information in crystal matrices or quantum fields. They wove data directly into the fabric of space-time itself. These tablets are just reading devices that access information embedded in reality. She touched a symbol on the tablet's surface and a new hologram appeared above her head. This one showed the galaxy as it had existed 50,000 years ago. Instead of the carefully organized sectors controlled by the 5 tribunal species, the display revealed a chaotic but vibrant tapestry of thousands of different civilizations. The galaxy was very different then, Sarah Chun said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. There was no central authority. No single group that claimed ownership of everything. Species met, traded, fought, made peace, shared knowledge, and went their separate ways. It was messy and complicated and sometimes dangerous. The hologram zoomed in to show specific systems. Worlds covered in crystal cities that sang with harmonic energy. Planets wrapped in living metal that grew into fantastic architectural shapes. Gas giants turned into massive computer systems that calculated the movements of stars. Ocean worlds where entire civilizations lived in floating cities that could dive to any depth. But something changed 28,000 years ago, Sarachun continued. 5 species decided that the galaxy needed better management. They formed an alliance and began what they called the Great Pacification. The display shifted to show the early days of what would become the Tribunal. The 5 founding species were there, but they looked different. Younger somehow, less refined than their current forms. Their ships were smaller, their technology more crude. They started with good intentions, Sarachun said, reading from the tablet. The Korathi wanted to prevent wars between species. The Zephyrians believed that unrestricted technological development was dangerous. The Nexari thought collective decision-making was more efficient than individual species acting alone. The Thalassans wanted to protect young civilizations from making mistakes. The Voidborn believed that some knowledge was too dangerous for most species to possess. The hologram showed early tribunal interventions, diplomatic missions to resolve conflicts, technology sharing programs, cultural exchange initiatives, joint exploration projects. For the first few thousand years, it actually worked quite well, Sarachun admitted. Wars became less common. Dangerous experiments were prevented before they could cause disasters. Young species received guidance that helped them avoid pitfalls. The galaxy became more peaceful and stable. Then what went wrong? She asked, looking up at the 5 thrones. The records show exactly when things changed. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was a gradual process that took place over centuries. The display now showed the tribunal's growing influence. Their fleets becoming larger and more powerful. Their administrative structures spreading to more and more worlds. Their laws becoming more detailed and restrictive. The problem was success, Sarachun said simply. The more peaceful the galaxy became, the more the tribunal believed their methods were correct. The more species accepted their guidance, the more they believed guidance was necessary. The more power they accumulated, the more convinced they became that they were the only ones qualified to wield it. The tablet's surface rippled with new information, and Sarachun read directly from the ancient records. This is from a Korathi council meeting 15,000 years ago. Quote, "The younger species clearly cannot manage their own affairs responsibly. Left to their own devices, they will inevitably return to chaos and war. It is our duty to provide permanent oversight for their own protection." She flipped to another section. This is from a Zephyrian policy document 12,000 years ago. Quote, "Advanced technology in the hands of immature civilizations represents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. All research and development must be subject to tribunal approval to prevent catastrophic accidents." The Nexari swarm buzzed anxiously, their harmonious voice breaking into discordant fragments. "Those are taken out of context. The decisions were made for the greater good, were they?" Sarachun asked. She touched another symbol, and the hologram changed to show a timeline of species extinctions. Thousands of markers appeared across the galaxy, each one representing a civilization that had vanished during the tribunal's reign. The builders were the first major species to resist tribunal oversight, she read from the tablet. They believed their ring technology should be shared freely with all species. The tribunal declared their attitude irresponsible and dangerous. When the builders refused to submit to regulation, they were classified as a threat to galactic security. The display showed builder worlds being surrounded by tribunal fleets. Not attacked, just isolated, cut off from trade, communication, and contact with other species. It took 800 years for builder civilization to collapse completely, Sarachun continued. They weren't destroyed by weapons, they were destroyed by loneliness. A species that had spent their entire existence connecting different parts of the galaxy suddenly found themselves completely alone. She moved to another entry. The Songweavers came next. Their universal translation technology was deemed too powerful for unrestricted use. The Tribunal took control of all communication networks for security reasons. Within 600 years, the Songweavers had forgotten their own language. Entry after entry, the pattern repeated. Species that developed technologies or ideas the Tribunal found threatening were gradually isolated, restricted, and controlled until they simply faded away. But the most interesting entries, Sarah-chan said, are about species that tried to resist. The hologram changed to show a massive battle above a red giant star. Thousands of ships fought while the star itself seemed to be weaponized, hurling solar flares at specific targets. The Star Shepherds were the last species to openly defy Tribunal authority, Sarah-chan read. They had developed technology that could manipulate stellar cores, using stars themselves as tools for terraforming and energy generation. The Tribunal declared this too dangerous to allow. The battle raged across the display for several minutes of compressed time. Ships the size of moons exchanged fire that could crack planets. The star itself pulsed and writhed as competing forces tried to control its output. The war lasted 300 years, Sarah-chan said quietly. When it ended, the Star Shepherds were extinct. Their technology was declared forbidden knowledge. Even their name was removed from official records. She closed the tablet and the hologram disappeared. The chamber returned to its normal lighting, but somehow everything seemed darker than before. This is why humans chose not to ask permission, Sarah-chan said, looking up at the 5 silent thrones. We read the real history of this galaxy. We learned what happens to species that submit to Tribunal authority. We decided we would rather take our chances with chaos than accept the certainty of slow extinction. The Voidborn finally spoke, its shadow form wavering like smoke in a breeze. What do you want from us? Sarah-chan smiled, and this time it was not pleasant at all. Nothing, she said simply. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to inform you that your 10,000-year monopoly on galactic authority is over. The age of asking permission has ended. The words hung in the air like a challenge that could not be taken back. Sarah-chan stood in the center of the vast chamber, looking up at 5 beings who had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and told them their time was over. The silence that followed was so complete that even the station's life support systems seemed to hold their breath. The Korathi judge was the first to respond, his massive stone form grinding as he leaned forward. Rocks fell like rain from his ancient body as his voice boomed through the chamber with the force of a planetary earthquake. You dare threaten us? He rumbled. Your species has barely learned to leave your home system. We have fleets that could turn your worlds to ash. We have technologies that could erase your entire species from existence. We have allies throughout the galaxy who depend on our protection. Sarah-chan nodded thoughtfully, as if she were considering his words carefully. You're absolutely right about your military power, she agreed. Your fleets are impressive. Your weapons are devastating. Your technology is far beyond anything humans could build on our own. She paused and pulled out her notebook again, flipping to a page near the back. Which is why we didn't plan to fight you, she continued calmly. Fighting would be stupid. Humans aren't stupid, despite what you might think. The Zephyrian prosecutor crackled with electrical anger. Then what exactly do you think you can accomplish with your archaeological discoveries and historical records? You cannot change the present with knowledge of the past, can't we? Sarah-chan asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small communication device. It looked crude compared to the advanced technology visible throughout the chamber, but when she activated it, something extraordinary happened. Every screen, display, and communication system in the entire tribunal station flickered to life simultaneously. The holographic displays that normally showed administrative data were replaced with a single image, the Builder Data Core Sarah-chan had shown earlier, but now it was connected to what looked like a massive computer network. While I've been Talking to you, Sarah Chun said conversationally. This conversation has been broadcast live to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Every species that has communication technology has been watching and listening. And more importantly, they've been seeing the historical records I showed you. The Nexari swarm buzzed in alarm, thousands of individual voices creating a sound. Like an approaching storm. That is impossible. All galactic communications are routed through tribunal networks. We control all information flow. You control the networks you know about, Sarah Chun corrected. But humans have spent the last 50 years building our own communication system. We use builder technology to create quantum entanglement relays that bypass your infrastructure completely. Every human colony, every species we've contacted, every archaeological site we've explored is connected to an independent network you never knew existed. The displays around the chamber changed to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Instead of the familiar tribunal communication lines connecting major worlds, a completely different network was revealed. Thousands of thin golden lines connected. Human colonies to alien worlds, archaeological sites to research stations, and independent species to each other in a web that covered almost the entire galaxy. We call it the Free Network, Sarah Chun said. And right now, representatives from over 8,000 species are watching this broadcast. They're seeing the true history of the galaxy for the first time. They're learning what really happened to the Builders, the Songweavers, the Star Shepherds, and all the others. The Thalassian representatives' colors shifted rapidly through patterns. That indicated extreme distress. You have violated the most fundamental laws of galactic security. Unsupervised information networks are expressly forbidden for exactly this reason. Forbidden by who? Sarah Chun asked. By you? Based on what? Authority? You've been telling everyone that you maintain peace and order, but the historical records show something very different. They show 10,000 years of systematic oppression disguised as protection. She touched her communication device again, and the displays changed to show something that made every alien in the chamber freeze in shock. It was a live feed from worlds throughout the galaxy, and everywhere the same thing was happening. Crowds were gathering in the streets. Not angry mobs, but organized groups of beings from dozens of different species, all watching the broadcast. On public screens, and they were talking to each other. Species that had been kept separate by tribunal regulations were communicating directly for the first time in millennia. The Altarians are comparing their experiences with the Centauri. Collective, Sarah Chun narrated as the images flowed across the screens. They're discovering that both species have been told the other was dangerous and unstable. The Vegan Mining Guild is sharing technical specifications with the Kepler engineers for the first time in 3,000 years. The oceanic species are realizing they have more in common with each other than they ever knew. More feeds appeared showing similar scenes on world after world. Beings that had been isolated for generations were reaching out to reconnect with the wider galaxy. This is chaos, the Voidborn declared, its shadow form writhing with agitation. You are destroying the stability we have maintained for 10 millennia. Without proper oversight, these species will return to the wars and conflicts that plagued the galaxy before our intervention. Maybe, Sarah Chun admitted. Or maybe they'll find better ways to solve their problems than submitting to the authority of 5 species who have forgotten that power is supposed to serve a purpose beyond maintaining itself. She gestured to the screen showing the growing crowds on distant worlds. Look at them. Do they look like they're preparing for war? Or do they look like people who are finally free to talk to their neighbors after being locked in separate rooms for thousands of years? The Karathi judge's voice was quieter now, but no less menacing. Even if you have managed to disrupt our communication networks temporarily, you cannot maintain this rebellion. We have governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. We have the experience, the resources, the infrastructure necessary to maintain order. Your networks will fail. Your species will fragment. Your allies will abandon you when they realize the consequences of defying us. Sarah Chun smiled, and for the first Time since she had entered the chamber, her expression was genuinely warm and happy. "You still don't understand," she said gently. "This isn't a rebellion. This isn't humans trying to replace your authority with our own. This is something completely different." She touched her device one final time, and the displays changed to show the most shocking sight yet. It was a massive construction project in space, but not like anything the Tribunal had ever seen. Instead of one species building according to their own design principles, hundreds of different species were working together on the same structure. "We call it the Galactic Commons," Sarah Chun explained. "It's being built in neutral space using technology and resources contributed by every species that wants to participate. It's not a government or a military installation or a trade center. It's a place where any species can come to share knowledge, resolve disputes, coordinate exploration, and make decisions about issues that affect everyone." The construction project was enormous, clearly visible even from the distance the cameras were filming. Ships from dozens of different species moved around the structure like insects building a hive, but each working according to their own capabilities and methods. "The interesting thing about cooperation," Sarah Chun continued, "is that it's more efficient than control. When species work together because they want to rather than because they have to, they accomplish things that no single authority could ever manage." She closed her notebook and put it back in her bag, then looked up at the 5 thrones one last time. "Your reign is over," she said simply. "Not because we're destroying it, but because we're building something better. You can try to stop us, but you can't stop 8,000 species who have decided they don't need your permission to talk to each other anymore." Sarah Chun turned and walked toward the chamber doors without waiting for a response. As she reached the exit, she paused and looked back. "The galaxy belongs to everyone who calls it home," she said. "It's time you remembered that." The doors closed behind her, leaving the Tribunal alone with the sound of their 10,000-year empire crumbling around them.